Chapter 22 The Fifth Gate. With heavy hearts, Requiem, Gio and Urasil trudged along the lawn path that rolled before them. As he walked along, lost in his memories of Freya, barely acknowledging the world around him, Urasil noticed a clump of bluebells springing out from the lawn and felt compelled to comment. Bluebells. Freya always loved those, he said solemnly. Foxgloves too, added Gio, pointing further along the path, glad that someone had broken the silence. Urasil gazed forlornly at the sprouting flowers that Freya had so loved and sighed. You were right, Gio. Freya would have wanted us to continue. Urasil's voice became croaky as he held back the tears over the loss of his best friend. Perhaps these flowers are her way of saying that she's with us. Finally, a disillusioned Requiem spoke. I'm getting so strong, he uttered, looking blankly at the flowers. Why then? Why could I not save her? Feeling his anguish, Gio put his hand on Requiem's shoulder. You can do everything right and still not win, he said wisely. Requiem flicked his head up to look at Gio. What is that supposed to mean? He snapped. Urasil understood. You know, Freya used to go on about chaos theory and gene-environment interaction. To be honest, most of it sounded like gobbledygook to me. However, there was one thing that I took away from it all, that the world around us has a far greater say in what happens in our lives than we like to think. So, even if you do everything right, it is all the subtle effects of the world around us that will combine to determine the outcome. Unless you can control everything in the world, you can't guarantee anything. So, can you control the world, Requiem? Gio had to snap his jaw shut before it hit the ground. That was very profound. There was even some science in there. Are you all right? Urasil gave a thoughtful smile. I suppose more of Freya rubbed off on me than even I knew. Requiem knelt down to look at the bluebells and foxgloves, pondering his friend's words. No, I cannot control the world and everything in it. I can destroy it, though. Plucking a bluebell from the ground, Requiem got up with a sigh. Destruction seems to be the only thing I'm good at, and that just brings the game to an everlasting conclusion where we all lose. Gio laughed off Requiem's depressing proclamation. Oh, I don't know. I think you improved the West Gate when we were there last. It's about time those old dusties lightened up, and pink polka dot is sure to tickle even the most aged funny bone. Urasil coughed. Well, quite. More importantly, it shows you can do more than destroy. Your abilities are growing all the time. Requiem looked at the flower he had just picked. He could already see its energy ebbing away. Too late for Freya, though. I doubt I'll be able to turn back time. Gale folded his arms and spoke with gentle admiration. I wouldn't discount the old girl just yet. It's not over until the fat lady sings, and she has many more years to go before she becomes even remotely podgy. Although, counsel help us all if she does decide to sing. Urasil chuckled. Yes, I think I'd rather go for a ride in the monolith than suffer that. A crack appeared on Requiem's face as a slither of optimism seeped into his heart, and he shot energy back into the bluebell. As he bent down, Requiem opened a small hole in the ground and planted the flower. Standing tall and radiant, it prepared to go on living. You're right, said Requiem with building cheer as he got up. We do have the uncertainty principle on our side, I suppose. Until we see her, she is both dead and alive. Thank you. Clapping his hands to his mouth, Requiem turned red. What am I saying? Uncertainty principle? Both dead and alive? Now I'm starting to sound like Freya. Maybe you're right. Maybe she isn't dead. Maybe I'm turning into her. Oh, that's good, said Gio in relief. At least I won't have to wear spandex any time soon. Heartened by the thought that Freya could well be alive, The group continued on. It was not long before they could hear the thundering Amazon River, although the river itself still appeared to be some distance away. When they finally reached the water's edge, Uracil peered at it suspiciously. "From the awful noise it's making, this wasn't what I expected from the great Amazon River. It looks less like an unstoppable force of nature and more like milky brown undulating silk." Geo put his hand on Uracil's back and thrust him closer. No, you've got it all wrong. This isn't silk, it's chocolate." Uracil turned to look back at Geo. "Well, if that's the case, you can drink us to the other side." "Who we really need is Freya. She's the chocolate fiend." Geo looked up at the sky and scratched his cheek. "I never understood how she could secretly like chocolate, but no other sweets. Gummy bears, sherbet, Turkish delight, they're all wonders, wondrous things." "Geo," Requiem called from further along the bank, "you're dribbling." Geo ignored Requiem as he squinted at a black dot on the horizon. "What's that?" he pondered. Suddenly, something crashed into the river, yelling loudly as it resurfaced. It was Freya! Requiem stood there stunned, unable to move. Uracil and Geo looked on equally dumbfounded. The fact that, by now, Freya was struggling against the strong undercurrent was completely lost on them. She turned and tried to swim towards her friends, but was dragged under. Finally, her reappearance much further downstream jolted them all into action. "Freya!" they all shouted in unison as she was dragged under once more. "What should we do?" shouted Uracil in anguish as he turned his lightest shade of pale yet. "Rescue her, of course," replied Geo. Uracil gave Geo a contemptuous look. "You know, sometimes, Geo, your pearls of wisdom are just too profound," declared Requiem calmly as he looked down the river. "Ain't you?" replied Geo cheerily. Uracil held his head in his hands and groaned. Then, remembering why they were having this conversation in the first place, he looked up and shouted, "Freya!" as he whipped around to look at the river. Pulling his hands down the sides of his face, Requiem turned to Geo and spoke with a clear reluctance. "Although I'm loath to be treated in such a manner, could you pick me up and throw me ahead of where we last saw Freya?" Geo did not like this idea one bit. He was well versed in Requiem's sensibilities, and being thrown into a muddy river was probably on his world destruction list. Leaning back and peering at Requiem, Geo asked hesitantly, "You're not going to forget you asked me to do this with your sieve-like memory and come after me while I sleep, are you?" Requiem didn't look at Geo whilst he replied with preoccupied honesty, "I can't promise that, but I'll do my best." Geo grabbed Requiem by his waistcoat and span as if he were throwing a discus, launching him high into the air and far across the river. Requiem came crashing down in the centre of the Amazon River with a mighty splash. The water froze as it was flung up high. Vast swathes of the river followed suit and froze solid whilst the rest of the fluid water continued its course around the large block of ice. Requiem stood in the narrow hole in the ice, admiring his handiwork, before spreading his arms to his sides, melting the ice around him to make the opening wider. Gazing around, he was finding it hard even to see energy signals. Deciding that the old-fashioned way was the best, he illuminated the darkness with a ball of fire that hovered above his head. This caused further ice to melt. As the hole gradually filled, Requiem realised that the melted water had nowhere to go. Closing his eyes and concentrating hard, he stamped his heels. Behind him, 2 small tunnels melted their way through the base of the ice, joining the water-filled hole he was standing in. The water rushed out of the holes, eager to join the course of the river. Now Requiem could melt more ice without drowning himself as he searched for Freya. As Requiem started to walk forwards, the ice melted as if it knew better than to stand in his way and hurried out into the tunnels he had made. Requiem walked with his hands in his pockets, trying to pick out Freya from the myriad of debris trapped in the dirty white ice. The rocks and silt sitting at the bottom of the ice made his passage difficult as they melted into a thick sludge. Requiem became certain that their sole purpose was to stick to his suit in an attempt to ruin it. In fact, it was clear to Requiem that nature was most displeased with his antics as the long river plants tried to entangle him and fish slapped him as they rained down from the melt, thrashing about and gasping for water until it flowed over them to carry them out to the river. Requiem pushed on. He found a capsized rowing boat, a large toad, even a shopping trolley, but no Freya. A flash of light near his ankles caught Requiem's eye. Before he could focus, the snapping jaws of a crocodile darted for his leg. Requiem quickly pulled out of the way before the strike hit, standing on one leg with his hands up to his chest. A large dark shadow loomed ahead, and Requiem found himself inextricably drawn to it. The closer he got, the more convinced he became that it couldn't be Freya. It was far too large. But what was it? The shadow took up much of the middle of the river. Curiosity got the better of him as Requiem put his hand on the ice to melt it quicker and pressed his face up close. Black gave way to red bellies and needle-pointed white teeth as large piranhas rained down on him, snapping as they fell from the frozen shoal. Whoa! I've heard of raining cats and dogs, but this is ridiculous. Requiem put his arms over his head as he tried to dodge the falling piranhas. Requiem hurried on, aware that he was building a collection of angry animals with large teeth behind him. Back on the bank, Geo and Urasil had converted a couple of deck chairs and made themselves comfortable with ice creams and sunglasses, watching Requiem's progress as he cut a meandering path through the ice. "Uh-oh," said Geo in alarm. "He's going too far left. He's going to melt straight through into the river and be swept away." We must warn him," stammered Urasil. "Here, throw in this." Urasil picked up a piece of driftwood. Turning it into a stop sign, he passed it to Geo. "Cool," Geo said, as he admired Urasil's skills. "That should do the trick." He threw the stop sign like a frisbee into Requiem's path. Above him, Requiem could hear an unnerving clattering. Something fast and flat bounced off the walls and dived for his head. He ducked not a moment too soon. As he got up gingerly, Requiem saw the stop sign quivering in the ice. Looking up, Requiem called out, "I'd prefer if you didn't try to kill me in an attempt to stop me dying." A little further on, Requiem could see another large dark shape. As with the piranhas, he couldn't make it out without melting more ice. Having learned his lesson, he converted some ice into an umbrella and opened it above his head. "Let's see what you are," said Requiem as he peered into the melting ice. Two large eyes shone in the light as the ice poured away to reveal the head and partial body of a giant anaconda. The snake hissed and snapped at Requiem. "Back, you beast, back!" Requiem demanded as he fended off the snake with the umbrella whilst beating a hasty retreat. This only enraged the beast, who freed itself from the ice and slithered after Requiem. Just then, Requiem saw the low-level twinkling of a very large crocodile's eyes. He dove towards the black mass. Ice gave way to water, and the giant crocodile was freed. The crocodile followed the flow of the water as Requiem slid narrowly past. Turning onto his back, Requiem looked down to see the crocodile and anaconda meet. To bellows and hisses, he made his escape. From above, Geo turned to Urasil. "That doesn't sound good." "No worse than your stomach," replied Urasil unconcerned before rolling up his sleeves to improve his tan.